All right. Happy Monday, everyone. Thank you for tuning in on this Memorial Day. We thought a better way to celebrate than any sale was by talking with one of our mentors and celebrating Mentor Monday yet again. So I am Becky. I'm one of the program managers with the ISTI. And today I am so excited to introduce Marina Sofi over at Microsoft. So Marina, I'm going to turn it over to you if you'll give us a little recap of who you are.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Glad to be on. And so yeah, happy Monday, everyone. Hopefully everyone is enjoying their Memorial Day weekend. As Becky said, I'm a part of the Microsoft team. I'm within services and I'm an account manager on the technical side. And I've been a mentor since my second year. But yeah, super glad to be on.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, let's start off. Tell us about your career path at Microsoft. Were you always interested in technology or computer science, and kind of what led you there?
Sure, yeah. So I joined Microsoft right out of college. I went to college to major in computer science. 2 years into the program, I ended up switching my major. I then got into management information systems, which was still technical, but with a little bit of, business mixed into it. And then Microsoft was at our career fair, and I just ended up dropping my resume, thinking I would never get a call. I mean, come on, it's Microsoft, right? And surprisingly, I did get a call the same evening, and ever since I've been a part of the Microsoft team. I've been in the same organization within Microsoft, but I've switched teams. I have kind of done a few different things within the same organization. But yeah, I've always kind of loved computers. I've loved technology. I know we say we love computers, but there's so much more within that technology that, is just so fascinating.
Awesome. And you mentioned as well that you have a degree in management information systems. So can you give us a little synopsis of what that means?
Sure, yeah. So I actually was one of the first classes that had management information systems as their major, and it was, at least when I was in college, it was a comparatively newer subject, but it basically connects, in a nutshell, it connects the technical world with the business world. So we know every business, regardless of what industry we're talking, runs on technology, and there is a technical component that makes a business run or makes a business do its day-to-day processes, whether it's a simple cash register that you run into, or whether it's something that you're on your app, you're ordering food, for example. Everything is technical. So management information system sort of is that connecting little glue that makes it, the way I look at it, it's a bridge between the two worlds, in a nutshell.
No, I like that a lot. I had never heard of that major before too, so it's interesting to kind of hear that it's a bridge. I also know that you just said you pivoted from computer science to choose this. So what motivated you to kind of make that change originally?
Yeah, so I was a sophomore when I got my first internship, and I worked. It was a collaborative project between the National Science Foundation and IBM, and it was a very, very cool project. I mean, we designed robots that looked like puppies. So they looked like little puppies with mechanical little pieces to it, and they were for special kids. So we downloaded, or we installed or programmed sensors. So like when these kids would wave at the dog would come to it. If kids would, for example, clap at it, if it could hear it, it would bark. It would make this little barky noise. So I mean, it was an amazing project, and I loved it. It was actually one of the highlights of my life in terms of the work that I've done. But I kind of realized that I loved the work that I was doing. I loved programming, but I just kind of felt like there was something missing. There was that human element in it that I just kind of missed. I was a code tester, so I basically coded and tested code, and I loved it. But I just felt like I wasn't talking to people. I wasn't interacting with people. There was something that was just missing, and that kind of got me to think a little bit. I was talking to professors, actually had a mentor in college too, and I kind of wanted to see what I could do while still being a little technical, but at the same time not completely discarding my technical background, but just doing a little bit more that had a human touch to it. And I say that very loosely because not that programmers don't work with other people, but it's just not as team oriented as you would think.
Sure. And I think one of the big things that you highlighted as well, and we try and tell a lot of our students, is the pathway to where you are in a career or whatever you choose to be in is not always linear. So having those experiences to help shape and find, the pieces that you're missing and what makes you feel satisfied in the work that you're doing, I think that's really important just to highlight and call out again. If you were talking to some of your students who may be unsure of what to choose or have a lot of different interests and feel like they're being forced to choose, what would be some advice you could give them?
Oh God, yeah, that's I think how every one of us felt when we were in college, and even the kids that I spoke with while I was working at Infinity. I mean, they all felt the same way, where they had all these different things and they wanted to do and they wanted to look into. I would really say is if you don't have a mentor, get a mentor, and it doesn't have to be an official onboarding where you hand up a certificate to someone and that's your mentor. It can be anyone. I have multiple mentors across, people that I have met, I have worked with, I have met through networks. So find someone that you can kind of ask these questions to, right? Like, let's say if I want to look into programming, for example, try to look for someone within your network that's in that field and just ask them, be like, hey, I have a few questions. Would you be open to sort of being that person that I could ask these questions to? The second thing is look into your networks. Maybe your friend's mom or your mom's neighbor, or there are so many people within your circle that you could sort of tap into. And I think that's one thing that growing up I didn't really make good use of. I had a very diverse circle in terms of the people my parents hung out with. There were a lot of programmers, a lot of business analysts, a lot of folks that I wish I could have spoken to, and I knew them all along. So kind of do that research. Look who within you. You might not even have to do that extra work. They might just be your neighbors. They might just be in your friend circle, your friend's mom, your friend's brother, whatever. Right? Start there. The third thing I would say, once you find someone, right, who you think, oh my God, I love what this person does, seriously, don't ever hesitate to just ask them, hey, can I shadow you? Can I just be a fly on the wall where you're just doing your day-to-day stuff? I've had multiple kids who just are on the calls with me when I'm with my clients, and they're like, wait, can we just be a part of it? I'm like, yeah, if my client is okay with it and I'm not sharing confidential information and you want to see what it really is like, day-to-day, it's that real experience, right? Because at the end of the day, you could read all you want online, but unless you don't really live through it, like for example, I would have never made this switch probably to MIS had I not done that internship, because that's what made it real for me. So those are the three things that I would start with, and then do your research. Read up a little bit. What may sound really exciting to you may really not be that exciting, or what might sound really like boring and such a drag, might actually be really cool. And I think the other thing that is very important is when we talk about certain industries, we just get so focused on what we know about it. For example, within Microsoft, there are literally 500 different things that Microsoft does that even I, as being an employee for the past 8 years, might not know about. And there's so many quote unquote cool fields that right outside programming, outside engineering, outside designing, that you can look into if you just have a mild interest into that specific sector. So research, find someone, bother them with all the questions you have, and trust me, we love to help people out. And you'll be surprised. You will never ever meet someone saying, "Oh, I really don't want to help you with that."
I'm so glad that experience kind of put a lot of different puzzle pieces together for you in your path. And then I love giving that to the students as well, leveraging your community, kind of going out there and just asking questions. I think that's great. At ISTI, that's a huge part of our mission too, is giving exposure, giving experiences early on so that you're not, 10 years down the road and you're discovering something brand new for the first time that you fall in love with. So we try and get that out early. And you've been a crucial part in that through mentoring. I also love that you talked about your internship. So that leads me really well into the next question. And I know you said you had internship in college. Did you have more than one or just one? And what were your big takeaways from that internship as a young adult?
Sure. So I was required to do 2 internships, but I ended up doing 3 because I really found that with these internships, you end up learning so much more than honestly that goes on your resume. And when I go back and look at my internships, for example, the puppy robot internship, or the other one that I did with actually Microsoft before I joined Microsoft, those have shaped me way more than I think my day-to-day jobs have shaped me. And it could be that I was at a different stage of life, but I would just say for anyone that is a high school student or a senior and going into college, geez, look for opportunities that you could avail in terms of internship. It doesn't have to be official, and even if you don't get credit for it, just do it. You don't have to. Don't limit yourself, because what you can learn from an internship, even if you're just shadowing someone. For example, when I was in computer science before I switched out, we had a computer science lab where some of the graduate students would help other undergrads with just day-to-day questions. And I would literally be that annoying person who would just ask the grad students if I could just sit with them. And I would just watch them, the way they would help other people, the issues they ran into. So I kind of was proactively thinking about ways that I could, pace myself so I wouldn't run into those issues, for example. So you would never know. I think internships sometimes sound really scary because I've had, at least with Microsoft college recruiting, I've had some individuals reach out and say, "Oh my God, I don't have any experience. Am I ever going to get an internship?" Again, it doesn't really have to be that official, interview process and then you get accepted to an internship. Whatever you do, whatever experience you have outside your class, really call it an internship in a way because it's shaping you in some way. My biggest takeaway from my internships were the network that I built while I was in that internship, and I think I still am in touch with some of the folks that I worked with, even though it's been a while, and they are now doing different things and great things, but we still once in a while stay in touch. And at that point, when I was in college, I got my internship when I was a sophomore. I mean, it was life changing for me at that point because I kind of, for the first time, saw what I learned in classrooms was now something I could actually take it to the real world and apply it. It wasn't just limited to a module online. It wasn't limited to an exam that I took. I could actually tell myself that, hey, what I studied was something that I can actually use and I can help. And I think that's a part that we sometimes do not focus, especially in the field of technology, where we think it's very one-sided. And I was having that conversation with some of the kids. And, I told them a few projects that I've worked on with some of my clients, and they were amazed. They were like, "Wait, Microsoft does that? Wait, you can do that with technology?" I'm like, "Yes, you can." And I think things like that, you only notice that, you only realize that is when you talk to people within your field at an internship, when you work on different projects, for example, at an internship or at things that you do at college. So I think that networking and that exposure was really my takeaway.
Excellent. And I love to highlighting that, you don't know if it's the right fit unless you try it. So whether it's a small one or something really big and formal, you gain experiences from both. They're both opportunities to learn, which I think is really important. Also thinking back to Microsoft as a whole, I would say 100% of the students that you worked with and probably that you'd ever encounter would absolutely know Microsoft exists. They know what it is. They associate it with computers, but I don't think they fully grasp the breadth of what that industry covers. So I'd love to hear from you because you've been working there. One, dive a little deeper into really what you do day to day that I know you kind of touched on a little bit. And then we'd love to hear too, what are some roles that might surprise students as they learn about what opportunities are at Microsoft?
Right. No, definitely. And that's true. People always tell me, "Oh, you work at Microsoft. Are you an engineer?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not really quite an engineer." So what I do as a technical account manager is basically I'm, again, the connecting person between technology and services within Microsoft. So I work with clients that use Microsoft to run their backend technology, whether they're businesses, whether they are fast food chains, whether they are hospitals, financial firms, law firms, for example. So all of those, pretty much from small to large businesses, any company or any enterprise that uses Microsoft, from a mobile app to running their backend systems, whatever it may be, I kind of found that middle person, and I own that relationship from everything once a sale is made. So I'm their point person for everything and anything, which is good and bad, because from anything to a printer breaking to a disaster online of like a service down, I'm like the point person. So, and that kind of is a good thing as well, because I work with a huge group of people. So I work with architects, consultants, engineers, the product team, for example. So it's very robust the way that the role works, and you have to constantly be on your toes, and toes literally learning, trying to stay on top of things, because we are rolling out updates on our products pretty much every week, if not every day. So that's kind of my role in a nutshell. There are multiple components of it. There are individuals that are focused on public sector. There are individuals that are focused on industry verticals like financials, healthcare, education. So I'm sort of in the retail space where I have multiple customers across, industries that may not be, for example, education or healthcare or financial, something in between, like manufacturing, for example. And I, in many scenarios, whether especially with smaller customers, I'm the only Microsoft person they've ever seen, because I work very closely with the sales team. So sometimes it happens that the sales team come in, they do their work, a product is sold, and then it sort of comes over into my area, and that's where I sort of own that relationship. I manage it the way I want it to be, and that way it fits the customer's needs. So so that's kind of my role in a very high level. And I'm sure if I ask my mom what I do, she still does not really know what I do. She just says, "Oh, she does something in Microsoft." So,
Right, right,
so
right.
if whoever is listening and they can tell what I'm doing, then congratulations, you know more than my mom, who has seen me work at Microsoft for more than 8 years. But some of the roles that at Microsoft we have, I mean, you'd be amazed, especially in the fields of artificial intelligence, for example, or even things like outside engineering. So of course we have different departments or organizations within engineering, whether we're talking about devices, whether we're talking about products. But a lot of work is being done around the environmental space, which you wouldn't think Microsoft would be a part of, but there actually is. A lot of work is being done around community organizing in terms of technology responsibility for firms that have a technology footprint. Just for an example, in Chicago, we have a team that's dedicated to community relations, for example, and their job is to reach out to the different organizations, different opportunities, tap into different volunteering spaces where they can sort of be that connecting glue between Microsoft and social services, public services, human services.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, again, I don't know if people know about that. And I think the other field that I would really want to highlight is just kind of working around, the special needs that some people have, whether it's building it into an existing product, or whether it's modifying an existing product to meet everyone's needs. And there is so much work being done, whether we're talking about, just our laptop surfaces, our devices, or we're talking about built-in product enhancements that are just constantly being rolled out because people are trying to make sure that they're checking all boxes and they're being as inclusive as possible. So yeah, that's some of the things. And then, of course, we have an organization that's focused on cultural diversity, something, again, that I don't think people know about Microsoft, but culture and diversity is huge. So we have, a lot of different groups and teams that are focused on just sort of the culture at Microsoft and how can we embody the values that we stand for.
It's awesome to hear you talk about not only your role, but I mean, just as you said, the general kind of impact of Microsoft and the breadth and the reach of what this community and what this company really does for the people around them. And so I'm even learning as an adult. So I'm sure our students have learned a lot kind of as you've mentored them over this past year and last year as well. I also think it's just great too that it's so interdisciplinary. Nothing you said was siloed. So your role itself, you were talking about, you kind of work a lot with larger teams. And so again, that going back to the STEM challenge, you were helping students really focus on what does what does progressive teamwork look like? How does this become productive and effective as you're working towards a solution? And, not everyone in that group wants to just be the engineer, but really kind of all the different moving pieces with user experience and all that. So again, just another kind of great perspective for our students that this work is not siloed, and it really does hit a lot of different aspects, especially within a large company like Microsoft. So as I mentioned, you've been a mentor both this year and last year, and we also know that you mentor with other youth programs. So kind of pivoting towards mentorship specifically, why do you think it's important for students or just anyone to have mentors?
Oh God, I think everyone and anyone that you would ever talk to about mentorship, they just begin to tell you how much it has shaped their personal lives. And I can speak for myself. I had my first mentor when I was in high school, and I wish I had more mentors. And I knew the importance of mentorship, and I would have used my mentor a little, or that resource. I hate saying use my mentor, but use that resource, that relationship that I had cultivated in a more, in a better way. And that's something that I constantly tell all my mentees is, once you have that established relationship, please make use of it. Don't just let it sit there, or just don't sort of drop that consistency. Keep that. And just because you may not realize what it means right now to you, but trust me, when you're looking at it 5 years, 10 years down the road, and you go back and you're like, geez, I wish I had done more. I wish I had connected more. I wish I had been out there more. With mentorship, the thing is that you can experiment. You can sort of get out of your comfort zone in a very safe and secure environment. I have some mentees that I work with that are, they honestly tell me this is the first time they have sort of said it, because they've always heard themselves like say it in their mind, but they've never actually said it out, but they could say it to me. And they're like, wait, that actually does not sound as bad as I thought it would. And it kind of, and there's so many times when there are kids, say kids, because they're either in high school or college, and they're going to interview for a job, and they're like, hey, could we just do like a test drive with you? And I'm like, sure. And they mess up, they say things that I'm like, I would never say that, or but it's with me. So they kind of, and that's an example of the way I look at mentorship is you could just be yourself in a way without having that risk of being judged or that working against you in any way. At the same time, you have this person that you could literally tap into his or her resources in terms of experiences, network, in terms of the insight and the wealth of knowledge that they bring. Like I have mentors that are from all different age ranges. So, they tell me about things that they wish they could have done differently, that they could have done in this way or that way. And guess what? I don't have to pay them for this kind of service, right? It's just something that it's so organic. I think it's in a way where it's just that you have this friend that you can lean on, but at the same time, this friend is not just your buddy, but this person is a little more accountable for the way they carry themselves and the way they sort of operate with you. So it's just more than a friendship. I kind of look at it as a professional friendship, if that makes sense. But I just think mentorship is so important because it not only, of course, the things that I mentioned, but it's just a way of sort of bringing that another insight into your life. Some of the kids that I work with that are foster kids, they have always either worked with their foster parents, with their shelter staff, and that's it. They've always met with only those folks. Mm-hmm. So the insight that they receive is from the same sources. And when they talk to someone not from that space, they're like, wait, wow, can you do that? Wait, is that possible? And that's so refreshing. And I can just imagine if I'm 15, 16, and I kind of get that window of fresh air, whatever it may be. I mean, I cannot even stress to kind of point out how important that would be for the way we grow. So in a nutshell, I think that would be my take on mentorship and why it is so important. And please don't ever think you just need one mentor. Don't ever think you need an organization or a group to initiate a mentorship. I mean, whatever it may take, seriously, just reach out and kind of build that relationship. And then there you can go. You can try whatever you want to try in terms of whatever you're working with in front of someone that you can judge. I mean, you can trust and won't judge you.
Since becoming a mentor yourself, what do you feel like you've learned about yourself?
God, what have I learned about myself? I think I've learned that this is something that just kind of gives me more meaning in life. To be honest with you, I know I always love to work with people. Of course, that's why one of the reasons I switched my majors, right? But it just kind of made me realize that how much I sort of coming like of course I'm a Kashmiri American, so I'm from a part of the world that you don't have those resources because of the political trouble that's going on. And I consider myself in a very privileged position, that I'm in a position where I can provide that sort of support that I know a lot of kids, not only in Kashmir but across the world, wish they had. They wish that they could just live through their life in like any other normal kid or any other kid that we know. And it kind of just makes me realize that we sometimes take things a little for granted just because we live in a certain situation, scenario, whatever, neighborhood, you name it. And these kids sometimes they bring things for you, they bring things in perspective for you, and you start to realize that it's just, no matter what happens out there in the world, at the end of the day, we're all somehow connected in a way. Like, for example, when I was working with the Infinity kids, and we just, we kind of gave them the plot that, hey, this is your scenario, and you have to come up with a project. They all jumped to community building in a way, and it kind of made me realize. I mean, I was kind of hoping, in a way, selfishly, that someone would think of something else, and I would be like, okay, well, you thought of something that would benefit you. No, they all thought of projects that could benefit the community in some way, whether it was, it was not a safe neighborhood and they wanted to build a system that would notify the authorities, or notify their parents, or in some scenarios where there were some kids that were being bullied and they wanted to construct a solution that could sort of be their that buddy, that safe zone that they could turn to. And it
Mhm.
just made me think, we sometimes just forget that. And it's that's, I think, one of the core things that I take from my mentorship is, it's not only, and I always tell this to my mentees, so it's not one way. Don't think I'm doing this only for you guys. You have no idea how much I'm learning from you. And ask any mentor, and they'll tell you how much have they learned from their mentees, and vice versa.
Mentorship, I absolutely agree, it's reciprocal, and so there's just that ongoing learning and relationship building. And yes, I agree with everything you just said, absolutely. Now, thinking back to kind of the Microsoft and the Microsoft team, we also celebrate that you were the only female mentor we had on the Infinity Microsoft team, so Microsoft will be on that next year. And we also understand that you are Kashmiri. I hope I pronounced that right.
Yeah.
And so not only do you bring a female identity, but you bring a cultural identity into what you do, not only with the students, but every day. How does your identity as who you are just play into your ideas and experiences?
Geez, yeah. I mean, I'll touch on the woman point first, the female point first, is because when I was in computer science in college, I remember, and I always tell this to all of my mentees, regardless of whether they're boys or girls. And I tell them, I'm like, when I walked into my first freshman computer science class, there were a group of guys that just looked at me, and I was the only girl in the class, and they looked at me and they said, you might be in the wrong class.
Oh,
And I looked at them and I said, no, I'm not in the wrong class. I'm in the right class. This is computer science 101. And, I'm in here. And that was sort of, in a nutshell, the 2 years that I spent within the computer science department. I was the only girl in most of my classes. I was the only girl always in my groups. On my internship, I was the only girl again. And I always looked at that as a way to, I mean, we have two options whenever we sort of stand out, right? We either embrace it and make that our strength, or we let that sort of work against us. And I've always kind of tried my best to not let it work against me in ways. And so I think that was where I started working around initiatives, whether it was at college or whether it was outside, like the Women in Technology, Women in Computing, to kind of make sure that girls don't feel that they have to be something specific, or they have to fit a category to be in this field. And I'm not only talking about computer science. I'm talking about are those industries where we kind of see that we do have a little imbalance between genders. Engineering would be the other one, for example. And that's kind of where I started working with those groups and working around individuals that were sort of focused in that same direction. And I said, let's do something, right? And that's why when I was at Microsoft, I started at Microsoft, and I told my manager, I said I would love to get in touch or involved with recruiting. And I did do Microsoft university recruiting for about 2 years, and I went back to my college. I did talk a little bit about my field, and one of my main aims was to kind of open it up to women and tell them, you don't really have to be a certain something that you think you need to be. And I kind of wanted to tell them that how much we as of course at Microsoft or any other company, we value that for whatever reason that you are different, right? Regardless of whether it's the experience you bring, the background you bring, or anything that would kind of make you different and help you stand out. So, and I've said the same thing to my mentors too, or my mentees, is don't ever let what is different about you, or whether you feel like, oh, I don't think I'm good enough, or I don't think I'm there yet, or I don't think I'm technical enough to have that conversation, or I don't know what people are going to say. I've been laughed at when I've asked questions in the class, because guess what? It was a computer science class. I was the only girl, and I didn't get it, and that's okay. And you have to embrace it, and you have to just make that something that you're proud of, and that's your strength. And that sort of stuck to me for the years that I was in college, and even after college. I've always embraced what's different. And even if I was in the only girl in the room, I might not be the loudest one, but at least I would know that just sometimes just being there is I don't know what's the word I'm trying to look for, but I guess it's just a statement in itself. In terms of my identity as a Kashmiri American, as mentioned, given the turmoil back in Kashmir and how kids over there have been one of honestly the biggest victims of the conflict. For example, they have, it's just, you and I can just imagine how it is to live in a conflict-ridden zone where, parents send their kids out to school and they don't know if they'll come back in the evening. And schools have been closed for months altogether. Connectivity has been restricted. So there are a lot of things that, and I can go on and on about how it has impacted the lives of children there. And I'm not even talking about adults. So I think that kind of brings things in perspective for me, because I realize that regardless of where we are, what part of the world we are, there are kids out there, even over here, for example, in Chicago, when I volunteered other schools that, and that are in certain neighborhoods within the state, and they don't have things that maybe I would see other schools have, for example, or resources that they would have available to them. I recently visited a school in Kashmir while I was visiting there last summer, and they had an innovation lab. And it was so much like the innovation lab that we had at Infinity. And, it just made me wonder, like the first day when I walked into Infinity and I looked at the innovation lab, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so similar. But I don't know when, in how many years will the opportunities that students have here, will they have back there? And in the small interaction that I had with the kids that I was working with at Infinity, and I try to tell them that, I said that because I have that sort of background, and I know what it feels like to come from a community like that. Just make sure you don't let this opportunity go wasted, because there are kids out there who would die for this. And I think I've used that mindset for pretty much everything I do and everything I'm engaged in. Is I know that nothing I've ever had, or nothing we ever have, should be something that we take for granted, because you never know when these things could be taken away, and you never know there is someone across the world who wishes they could have a fraction of what you have. So I think those two kind of things have shaped me in ways that I don't think I even would have ever imagined.
In your role too at Microsoft, or just kind of in your opinion, how do you feel diversity plays into an essential need in the workforce?
Yeah, I mean, I cannot stress how important it is, and the world we live in, and where we're moving towards. I feel like it's more and more important. In terms of I love the fact that I can talk to my peers about the work I do outside work. Whether it's nonprofit work, whether it's the mentorship that I'm engaged in, I love the fact that they can openly talk about their concerns, regardless of whether it's from their work, personal life, just in general. or we are at a level where we can talk about different things within the diversity and inclusion. And I just think it's so important, and I wish that there was more stress on it than I think it is, because that's what I think where we grow as a community, where we grow as an individual. Having diversity of thought, diversity of experience, it builds us in ways that I don't think we realize at that time. But when you go back and you kind of look at it and you realize, well, that's really happened because we were inclusive. We kind of broadened the scope of whatever it may be, whether it's a team we're working on, whether it's a project we're working on. And it builds us, it makes us more tolerant in ways. And apart from the fact that you learn a thing or two every day, when you have a diverse team, when you have a more inclusive environment, people let down their guard. They're more organic, they're more true to themselves, and you kind of get to see the real self, versus just sort of like, I don't know. I feel like people put up guards when they know that they have that fear, because we're all at the end of the day fearful in some way, to some capacity, of whether being accepted for who we are. So I think for all those reasons, it's just so important to have to build and cultivate that culture, and it doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
It does not. It takes time. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort, conscious effort, I think, from all parties involved. It's not that you wake up one day and there you go, your environment, your culture, your group is diverse and inclusive. No,
Right.
it's a work in progress.
Within STEM, and I know you mentioned it, just being a collegiate young adult in computer science and being the only woman in the room. And then I think zooming out too, we see a lot, again, just within the STEM industries, that not only are women underrepresented, but women of minority backgrounds are underrepresented. What role do you think mentorship could play in changing that? And again, it's not an overnight, it's a long process. So what role does
Right.
mentorship play in that process?
Honestly, I feel like, and this happened. I don't think it happened this year that much, but last year when I was at one of the schools that was assigned to me, and I walked in and I kind of introduced myself, and I remember one of the kids, one of the girls, she was like, "Wait, are there like more girls at Microsoft? And are there girls in this field?" And I looked at her and I just felt that it was funny, because I realized just me being there in a way was some sort of like that, just started a conversation. And I really wish that we live in an era where being a woman of color in this industry is not a conversation starter. It's just a norm. And I know it will take time till we get there. We have come a long way since I started working in this field. And we have made strides in terms of the percentage of women in this field and the percentage of colored women in this field, but we're nowhere done. And I just felt that was so interesting, because and I still continue working with her off and on, and she's on her way to college, and I always tell her that, I'm like, do you remember that conversation we had? She's like, oh my god, it was so awkward. I'm like, no, it wasn't awkward.
No, the right thing is right. Perfect.
It made me realize, one, you were so honest with me, so thank you. Two, it told me a lot. It said that, and that's just the first thing I feel when you are a part of that marginal community or marginal demographic, and you are in that field, and then if you're mentoring someone, they look at you as a possibility that is possible, even though the odds are against you. For example, I mentioned in the beginning, was when I interviewed for Microsoft, I dropped off my resume. I had not in a million years thought that I would get called back, because it's Microsoft. We receive thousands of applications every day. So it's just kind of a testament in its own way that it is possible. And I think mentorship is so important, is because, one, they can see that it's a possibility, even though they may think it's impossible. Two, what may just sound and may just look way scarier from the outside, when you kind of talk to them and you tell them how things are at, for example, like Microsoft. I always tell them about diversity. I always tell them about the constant efforts that Microsoft is putting in to make it more of an inclusive environment. And they're like, really? Does that really happen? I'm like, yes. It's kind of breaking that perception. that is not impossible. And I don't think they would get this from our Microsoft website, for example, just because it's intimidating sometimes. But they kind of get that when they talk to someone, they can talk to the mentor, for example. So I think mentorship is critical because they open that window into possibility, into thinking that even though you may think it's impossible, it's really not impossible. And how can you? The other thing that I really focus on when I'm working with high school or even college kids is, as I mentioned, embracing the differences. Never be ashamed or never be shy about them. Never be embarrassed to ask a question, even if you know your question is stupid. Things like that. I feel like it's just small little bits and bytes that go a long way. You can never ever try to change someone inside out in in your first mentorship meeting or whatever. It's these small little things. I've seen things where I've seen individuals, girls and boys, who were never thought that they could speak in front of a class, they could speak in front of a group of people, and through months and months of work and practices and bloopers and whatever you call it, I've seen them present in a class full of people, in a class full of professionals that they would have never imagined even talking in front of. So that's something that mentorship can do. And as I mentioned, we are sort of your that trial zone that you can try whatever, experiment, practice, and that's what we are for.
I love that. All of that. um, just being honest with your mentees and having conversations that, expose them to new ideas, new people, new faces, but especially in STEM, being able to show students anyone can do this. This is possible for you, whether you feel you belong or you don't. And having a mentor there to kind of bolster that confidence is really critical to our mission. And you've been a great role model of that the whole time.
Sorry, yeah, and sharing those challenges, I think, is what makes it real. A lot of time I get asked, how is it being a girl at Microsoft? How is it being the only woman in your meetings? And that's true. I am most of the times the only woman on a call or the only woman in the room. And sharing those challenges, being honest and kind of exposing that, yes, it is difficult. It is uncomfortable, but you can overcome it. If I could do it, there's no reason why you can't. And I think that conversation is just, it switches the narrative, because it goes from how is it being like this to this is how it is being like this. I did it, you can do it too.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Marina, first off, for just sharing this time with us and having these conversations with us. And of course, thank you for being a mentor this whole past year and the year before. If anyone watching has questions for Marina, please put them in the comments. We'll make sure that she sees them and has the accessibility to respond. So Marina, again, thank you so much for being here today. And we can't wait to talk to you soon.
Of course. Thank you so much.